A millionaire caught his nanny sleeping beside his baby. What he did next shocked everyone. Ethan Carter's penthouse was wrapped in silence, the only light coming from the distant skyscrapers of Manhattan, casting a soft glow through the tall windows. The German sports car engine went quiet in the underground garage. It was exactly 11 p.m. when the elevator doors opened, and Ethan stepped out, tie loosened, shirt wrinkled, exhaustion clinging to every step after a meeting that ran longer than expected. He hadn't planned to come home this early. A last-minute cancellation gave him a rare window, just enough, maybe, to feel like a father again. Just enough to see what silence had been hiding. He entered through the kitchen, where the faint underglow from the range hood flickered across polished marble floors. The housekeeper had long gone to bed. The apartment was enveloped in that peculiar stillness only found in late-night hours, where each footstep felt amplified and fragile. Ethan walked lightly, heading down the hallway toward the nursery. He passed the master bedroom, unused since his wife Beatrice passed away a year ago. The home was frozen in time, filled with the illusion of normalcy, but void of warmth. Only Lucas gave him a reason to keep going. The nursery door was ajar. A soft orange hue spilled from the moon-shaped nightlight. Ethan smiled as he pushed the door open, picturing his son curled up in his crib, breathing softly, face relaxed in innocent sleep. But the smile died on his face. The crib was empty. Lucas sat on the floor in nothing but a diaper, surrounded by scattered toys, pillows, and a tangled blanket. His big eyes gazed up at Ethan with innocent curiosity. Upon seeing his father, Lucas giggled, raised his arms, and babbled, "Pop, Pop!" Ethan's heart pounded. His son? On the floor? Who let this happen? Then he saw her, the new nanny. Lena Morales, 25, hair pulled into a loose ponytail, was fast asleep. Slumped over the crib rail, her arms folded beneath her head, strands of hair spilling forward, her mouth slightly open. Deep asleep, unaware. A hot wave of fury surged through Ethan's chest. "What are you doing?" he thundered. Lena jolted upright, nearly falling backward. Her eyes darted around, disoriented, caught between sleep and reality. My son is on the floor, and you're sleeping on your first night?" His voice crashed through the room like a thunderclap. I just closed my eyes for a second," she stammered, glancing between the crib and Lucas, hands trembling. Ethan scooped up Lucas. The boy was still smiling, unaware of the storm surrounding him. Ethan held him close, checking for bruises, scratches. Thank God, none. But inside, his heart was spiraling. He could have been hurt. He could have choked on something. Or worse. Ethan couldn't hold it in. "Get out. Get your things and leave this house. Now." "Please, I need this job," Lena whispered, her voice cracking. "You had a chance. You blew it. Get out before I call security." Lena stood frozen for a few seconds, disbelief painted across her face. Then she turned, grabbed her worn-out bag from the corner, and rushed out without another word. The door shut behind her with a muted click, a cold, final sound that split the night in two. Ethan stood motionless, cradling Lucas against his chest. The baby snuggled close, whispering, "Papa?" Ethan murmured, "Daddy's here. I've got you. You're safe now." But a part of him didn't feel safe at all. 3 days later, Ethan Carter realized his penthouse was no longer a sanctuary. It was a maze of crying, exhaustion, and silent questions. Lucas had changed completely. Once a cheerful, curious toddler, he now sat eerily still. He refused food, no smiles, no sleep unless held, and even then he simply stared blankly into space, his eyes dull, the sparkle gone. Ethan had hired 3 new nannies in 4 days. The first, a college student studying early childhood education, lasted 7 hours. "He won't look at me, won't respond," she said, pale-faced as she grabbed her coat. "I've never seen a child like this." The second, a middle-aged woman with 20 years of experience, made it through one day. Lucas cried non-stop, vomited after eating, and spiked a low fever by evening. The moment she left the apartment, the fever vanished. The third was a child care specialist from a premium agency, highly recommended and highly paid. She lasted 3 hours. "He screamed like he was in unbearable pain," she said, wiping tears from her eyes. "I don't think I can help him." Ethan looked down at his son, curled into himself, clutching a stuffed bear, staring blankly at the ceiling. The emptiness wasn't just in the room anymore. It had made a home in his heart. Ethan booked a pediatric appointment the next morning. Lucas, lifeless in his arms, didn't flinch when touched, didn't smile, didn't cry. Dr. Camilla, mid-40s, calm eyes seasoned with years of quiet truths, finished her examination quickly and sat across from Ethan. "Physically, he's perfect," she said. "Lungs, throat, ears, all clear." "Then why won't he eat? Why won't he sleep? Why doesn't he react?" Camilla studied Ethan for a long moment, then spoke with quiet conviction. "Ethan, your son lost his mother not long ago, and now he's been through one stranger after another. How many caregivers has he had?" "4, including the first." "4 in under a week?" She raised an eyebrow. "Children form bonds, Ethan. Every new face who disappears is another goodbye. Lucas isn't just sad. He's mourning. He's in grief." The word grief hit Ethan like a cold, echoing bell. Something deeper than calm had been lost. He had lost connection with his son. "What should I do?" he asked, voice almost breaking. "He needs consistency," Camilla said. "One person, someone who stays, someone who makes him feel safe again." Ethan nodded slowly, but inside a storm was forming. There was only one person who had made Lucas smile in the past month, the one he had driven away, in a moment of anger. On the 5th night after Lena left, Ethan sat alone in his office chair, the warm yellow light above casting long shadows across the room. On the desk, his laptop displayed the home security system's interface. For a few seconds, he hesitated. Then he clicked on the footage from that night, the night everything had spun out of control. He'd skimmed it once before. This time, he slowed it down, watching closely. 12:34 a.m. Lena was still awake. She paced softly around the nursery, adjusting Lucas's blanket and pillow. She picked up a stuffed bear he'd tossed out of the crib. Lucas wouldn't sleep. He kept tossing and turning. 12:47 a.m. Lena picked him up, gently rocked him in her arms, quietly humming something, then laid him back down once he started dozing off. 12:58 a.m. Lucas popped back up. He sat up, unbuttoned his onesie, threw the pillow over the crib rails like it was a game. 1:02 a.m. Lena, clearly exhausted now, sat down beside the crib. She fought hard to stay awake. Her head bobbed once, twice, and then finally rested against the wooden rail. 1:04 a.m. While Lena slept, Lucas began his escape act like a miniature Houdini. He climbed the side of the crib, using the pillow as a stepping stool, then gripped the rail and carefully lowered himself to the floor. Every movement was quiet, precise, like he'd done it before. Ethan froze. He paused the footage, sat upright. A strange blend of shame and disbelief welled in his chest. He had accused someone of negligence, someone who had done everything in her power to care for his son, someone who stayed up for hours, attentive, patient, gentle, until her body gave out. And then, while she rested for just minutes, it was Lucas who climbed out on his own. Ethan rewound and switched to another camera angle. He could see Lena's face more clearly, drained, yes, but gentle. He saw her smoothing Lucas's hair as he lay down, saw her kiss his forehead, heard her soft lullaby echo faintly through the audio feed. This wasn't just a job. This wasn't just duty. This was someone staying long after her energy ran out. This was someone who genuinely cared. And he had thrown her out like a criminal because of one moment he never tried to understand. Ethan leaned forward, buried his head in his hands. He felt like a terrible father and an even worse man. Maybe it was time to make it right. The sky over New York was gray and cold. Ethan stopped in front of an old apartment building in Brooklyn, cracked walls, rusted stairs, a crooked address plate. He had never been in a place like this, not because he was afraid, but because he was ashamed. Ashamed that he had fired a woman, simply because she was too exhausted to keep her eyes open. He took a deep breath, then knocked on door 3B. An older woman opened it, thin, wearing a head wrap. Her skin was pale, her eyes tired but kind. "Sorry," Ethan said quietly. "My name is Ethan Carter. I'm here to see Lena Morales." She hesitated, then nodded. "She went out for medicine. Come in. It's freezing out there." The room was small, simple, but clean and strangely warm. An old armchair, a few family photos on the wall, and the faint smell of antiseptic in the air. She poured him tea in a chipped cup. Her hands trembled slightly. Ethan accepted it, guilt twisting in his chest. "You're Lena's mother?" "Yes," she smiled faintly. "Maria, you're her boss?" "I was," Ethan murmured. "I came to apologize." Maria was silent for a moment. Then she said softly, "She doesn't blame you, you know. She just cried, sat by my bed all night and cried." Her voice cracked. "She works 3 jobs, bakery in the morning, daycare in the afternoon, janitor at the hospital overnight, all to pay for my treatment. I told her to quit one. She laughed and said, 'I'm young, Mom. I can handle it.'" Ethan couldn't breathe. The image of Lena in his mind, lazy, careless, shattered. In its place stood a young woman fighting exhaustion, fighting poverty, fighting time itself, just to keep her mother alive. He felt small, pathetic, unworthy to even stand in that room. The door opened. Lena stepped in with a pharmacy bag. When she saw Ethan, she froze. Her face closed off instantly. "What are you doing here?" "To say, I'm sorry," Ethan said slowly. "I was wrong. I didn't know, and I judged you worse than anyone ever judged me." Lena's eyes darkened. "You don't need to pity me. I work because I have to, not because I want sympathy." "I know," Ethan said, voice trembling. "That's why I'm here, to make it right. I want you to come back, better hours, a real contract, proper pay, and I'll cover your mother's medical bills." Lena's expression flickered between anger and disbelief. "I don't want pity, Ethan. I work because I have to, not because I need saving." "It's not charity," Ethan said. "It's repayment for what I took from you. Call it a loan, if that makes it easier. But please come back. Lucas needs you. And I need to know I didn't drive away the only person who made my son smile." Silence. The ticking clock filled the room. Lena turned to her mother. Maria gave a faint nod. Lena drew a deep breath. "Fine, I'll come back, but it's a loan, like you said. I'll sign for it. I'll pay every cent." Ethan smiled for the first time in weeks. "Deal." Maria watched them both and smiled weakly. "Finally, someone sees the heart my daughter hides behind her stubbornness." Lena faced Ethan again. "We keep this professional." He nodded, though his eyes said otherwise. "For Lucas," he said. "For Lucas," she echoed, and in that small, quiet moment, both of them knew their lives had just changed forever. Life doesn't change overnight, but sometimes when the right person returns, the entire world feels softer. 3 days after their meeting in Brooklyn, Lena came back to Ethan's apartment. The door opened, and somehow, Lucas sensed it before he even saw her. He turned, eyes lighting up, and ran toward her like a tiny whirlwind. "Lala!" he cried out, garbled but full of joy. Lena dropped to her knees, arms wide. Lucas dove into her embrace, pressing his face into her shoulder, clinging to her like a child who'd finally found home. She closed her eyes, letting out a breath, not of exhaustion, but of quiet relief. A missing piece had returned to her heart. Ethan stood a few feet away, watching, frozen by something he couldn't quite name. Healing doesn't happen overnight. But sometimes it only takes one person to start it. From that day forward, everything began to shift. Lucas ate again, slept through the night, laughed more than he had since his mother passed. Lena knew how to coax him through tantrums, how to read the tiniest signs of discomfort. To her, this wasn't a job. It was something deeper. A bond. Ethan watched it all like a man waking up from a long sleep. He realized something that caught him off guard. There was something in Lena no one else had ever brought into their home. She didn't just care for his child, she brought life back into the apartment. Between simple lunches in the kitchen and late afternoon cups of coffee, they began to talk. At first, it was about Lucas, then about family, about past dreams, about New York, and about surviving through hard days. Lena shared her childhood, growing up with a mother juggling jobs, never really knowing what a day off felt like. Ethan spoke of losing Beatrice and the guilt that came with not being able to save her from cancer. It wasn't about pity. It was about understanding. Each day their glances lingered a second longer. Their smiles softened. The air between them grew quieter, warmer, filled with something unspoken. One evening, after Lucas had fallen asleep, Lena was tidying up toys in the living room when Ethan entered with 2 cups of hot cocoa. "It seems you did what no one else could," he said. "Lucas is himself again. Thank you." Lena gave a soft smile and accepted the cup. "I didn't do much. I just stayed." He looked at her, and for a moment the space between them felt like nothing at all. Their eyes met, a soft brush of fingers as the cup passed hands. Silence. So much unsaid. Ethan leaned forward slightly. Lena didn't pull away. Their breaths aligned, close enough to feel the warmth. But it was quiet, too quiet, until the doorbell rang. Ethan opened the door. Amanda Sterling stood there in her long coat, cold expression cutting through the air like winter itself. "Hello, Ethan," she said, voice flat. "Surprised?" "Amanda, why didn't you call first?" "I didn't think I needed to," she replied, stepping past him into the apartment. Her gaze swept across the room and froze. Lena was standing by the espresso machine, holding a cup, while Ethan, still close beside her, reached out to steady the spilled coffee. The distance between them, too close, the air, too warm. It didn't take Amanda more than a heartbeat to understand and to judge. Moments later, they sat across from each other in Ethan's office. The air was heavy, electric. "I think I just saw something I shouldn't have," Amanda said, folding her arms. "You didn't?" Ethan replied evenly. "Really? You and the nanny, drinking coffee, laughing, looking at each other like that? You're reading too much into this." "No, Ethan," she cut in sharply. "I'm seeing exactly what's there, and I won't ignore it." He clenched his jaw. "Amanda, don't—" "I will," she snapped. "Beatrice made me Lucas's backup guardian if you were ever deemed unfit. And developing attachments to your employee? That's more than enough for a judge to reconsider custody." Her voice was ice. "You're involved with a poor girl, fired once for negligence, a sick mother, no financial stability. You think that won't raise eyebrows?" "It's not about what's true, Ethan. It's about what looks true." Ethan rose to his feet. "She's done nothing wrong." Amanda smiled coldly. "She doesn't have to." Lena stood quietly in the hallway, her heart sinking with every word. That night, when Ethan tried to talk to her, she shook her head gently. "I heard," she whispered. "She's right, Ethan. If there's even the slightest chance you could lose Lucas because of me, I can't stay." "Don't say that. I can fix—" "Ethan," she interrupted softly, tears glimmering. "Sometimes loving someone means leaving before you ruin what's good." The next morning, the apartment was silent. No aroma of coffee, no soft hum of song. Just an envelope on the kitchen table. He opened it. The handwriting, neat, delicate, steady. "Ethan, I'm not leaving out of fear, but out of love. You're a good father. Don't let anyone make you doubt that. Lucas needs you, and you need peace. I can't give. Thank you for believing in me, even once. Lena." Ethan folded the letter, pressing it against his chest. Outside, the sky broke open. The storm had arrived, not outside, but within him. When you lose something truly important, you're left with only two choices: let go or fight for it. Ethan had spent years staying silent, choosing peace over confrontation. But losing Lena was different. This wasn't just the loss of a woman. He'd lost the one flicker of hope, the feeling of family he had only just begun to rediscover. Lucas started crying again at night, restless, barely eating. He called out for Lala in his sleep, tears running down his cheeks when he woke up without her. Ethan moved through his days like a shell, haunted by the question, if I had spoken sooner, would she still be here? That morning, as Lucas burned with fever, clutching the handmade toy Lena had sewn for him, Ethan sat on the floor beside his son's bed, a quiet desperation gripping his chest. And for the first time in years, he wept, not from grief, but from a father's helplessness. And in that breaking moment, something solidified inside him. He couldn't let silence take from him the two people who mattered most. Not again. He hired a lawyer, a private investigator. No press, no threats, just the truth. And within a week, he had it, and it stung worse than he expected. Amanda, the aunt who had once promised to love Lucas like her own, had already taken steps toward controlling the trust fund Beatrice had left behind. Leaked emails showed she'd contacted the bank, inquiring about a guardian-led transfer of financial oversight. Worse still, she had retained a PR firm, crafting a public image of a nurturing, trustworthy aunt in preparation for a custody battle. Ethan stared at the file in his hands, trembling, not with fear, but with fury. Not for himself, for Lucas. He didn't wait. A week later, Amanda arrived, confident as always. But this time, Ethan wasn't the grieving man she once knew. He was a father, ready to fight. The documents were already laid out. Emails, bank statements, legal confirmations. No space left for denial. "You said you cared about Lucas," Ethan said, voice low and steady. "But everything you've done says otherwise. You used Lena to paint a picture of me as unstable. Meanwhile, you were planning to take control of a grieving child's inheritance." Amanda tried to speak. He didn't let her. "I stayed silent because I thought you were family. But family doesn't use children as pawns. You'll withdraw your petition, and you'll apologize to Lena, in writing, in person, however necessary. You'll restore her name." Amanda looked at him, the cold drained from her face. She saw something different now. Resolve, and perhaps for the first time, respect. After a long silence, she gave a single nod. "I will." That night, with Lucas asleep beside him, Ethan sat alone, Lena's final letter glowing on his phone screen. He read it slowly, as if her breath still lingered on every word. And when he reached the end, a quiet smile crept to his lips. Not of relief, but of purpose. "It's my turn now," he whispered. And then he stood, like a man finally ready to follow the light he almost lost. The next morning, it rained. New York lay under a thin veil of mist, quiet and blurred, like the emotions inside Ethan. But this time, he didn't sit still in the dark. He stood, put on his coat, and stepped outside like a man with a purpose. He didn't know exactly where Lena was, only that she'd last lived near the hospital in Brooklyn where her mother was being treated. But sometimes the shortest path doesn't need an address. It just needs a heart to follow. And for the past few weeks, his heart had only pointed to one place. To a pair of kind eyes, a gentle voice, and the hands that once held Lucas with unconditional love. He opened the car door, placed his hands on the wheel, and in his mind, he didn't see Amanda. He didn't see the past. He didn't see fear. He only saw her, Lena. Today he would find her, not for duty, not for Lucas, but for himself, for love, and because he had finally learned that the woman worth keeping is the one who never asked to be kept. It was still drizzling when Ethan parked in front of the old building in Brooklyn. Nothing seemed to have changed after all these years. The chipped cement steps, the low potted plants by the windows, the faded red bricks of the aging building. But to Ethan, it all felt new. He had been here before, but this time wasn't out of guilt or duty. It was his heart, quietly and stubbornly, pushing him to find the woman he couldn't let go. He didn't bring flowers, no ring, just a folder in his hand and a promise that had never been spoken out loud. He climbed the stairs, heart heavier with every step. When he reached the door marked 3B, he took a deep breath and knocked. The door opened after a few seconds. Lena stood there, her face a little thinner, her eyes tired but alert. She wasn't surprised, not angry. She simply waited, as if she had always known this moment would come, and that if he came for the right reason, she would listen. Ethan didn't hesitate. He held out the folder. All the truth about Amanda. You deserve to know. His voice was calm, not pleading, not justifying. You weren't the problem. You were just the excuse she used to go after what was never hers, and I stayed silent too long and let it happen. Lena took the papers and flipped through them. Her lips tightened as she read the printed emails and testimonies. She didn't speak right away, but when she looked back up, her eyes were glistening. I left because I thought it was for the best, she said, voice as soft as breath. I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want you to lose Lucas because of me. Ethan stepped closer, his voice steady though his throat burned. Lucas needs you, and so do I. Not because it's convenient, not just because he loves you, but because you're the first person who made us both feel truly alive. He paused, his voice quieter. You're not a burden, Lena. You're the only part that made this place feel like home. She looked at him for a long moment, as if measuring every word, every breath. The air between them seemed to thrum with tension, one small shift, and it could shatter. But instead of saying anything more, she simply nodded, just once. But for Ethan, it was everything. The apartment door creaked open, and Lucas was on the living room rug, building towers with his blocks. He looked up instinctively at the sound of footsteps. His eyes widened. Then he leapt up, dropping everything in his hands. "Lala!" The cry burst out like sunlight breaking through a stormy sky. Lena barely had time to kneel down before Lucas launched himself into her arms, clinging to her with all the strength his little body could give. He buried his face into her shoulder, holding her as if afraid she'd disappear if he let go. Lena knelt down fully, hugging him tightly, her face pressed into his hair. Her tears flowed silently, no sobs, no words, just the quiet release of a love that had waited too long. Ethan stood a few steps behind, hands gripping the back of a chair, chest tightening. He didn't step in, didn't speak. That moment was theirs, between the woman he loved and the child who had missed her with every heartbeat. For the first time since this all began, the three of them were in one place, not as employer and nanny, not as a grieving father and a kind stranger, but as three souls who fit together like puzzle pieces in a picture finally whole. A family. That night, after Lucas had fallen asleep, Ethan invited Lena out to the balcony. She slipped on a light jacket and stood quietly, looking out at the glowing city. The night wind stirred her hair, and in that moment he saw a kind of peace on her face that he hadn't seen before. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Lena looked at him, a little surprised, but didn't ask. When he opened the box, a silver necklace appeared, its heart-shaped pendant simple and beautifully crafted. Ethan didn't kneel. There were no flowers, no romantic declarations, just a quiet truth between them. "This isn't a proposal," he said. "It's a promise." Lena didn't take it right away. She looked at him long enough that time seemed to stop. Then she reached out, gently took the necklace in her hand, and ran her thumb across the pendant. "If it's a promise," she replied softly but clearly, "then I need one condition. No secrets, no silence, no matter how hard it gets. We face it together." Ethan nodded without hesitation. "I promise." She smiled, and in that smile there was forgiveness, hope, and a quiet love that didn't need to be shouted to be real. No ring, no ceremony, just each other. And for the first time, after all the hurt and all the waiting, they were no longer two people trying to survive with a child between them. They were a family, complete, honest, and finally, home. The next morning, Ethan didn't wake up to an alarm clock, but to the sound of Lucas's laughter coming from the kitchen. The clink of a spoon tapping against a cup, the scent of freshly brewed coffee, and Lena's gentle voice floated through the apartment like a soft morning melody. What used to be a cold, silent space was now warm, not because of the heater, but because of the presence of two people, one small and one grown, who had made it feel like home. Their life wasn't perfect, but it was the imperfections that made it real. Lena no longer worked 3 jobs a day. Ethan wouldn't allow that to happen again. She now spent her mornings at a community learning center and reserved her afternoons and evenings for Lucas and for herself. Ethan, in turn, changed almost entirely. He worked from home more, picked Lucas up from preschool, helped Lena prepare dinner, and some nights they read to Lucas together until he fell asleep in their arms. Lucas no longer called her Lala. One afternoon, while they were reorganizing his toy shelf, he suddenly asked, "Mommy, where does this go?" Lena turned to him, thinking she had misheard. But Lucas looked straight at her, no hesitation, and said it again. "Mommy?" This time she cried. Ethan watched from across the room, saying nothing, only stepping closer to rest a hand on her shoulder and nod. No permission needed, just love. Still, they never tried to erase Beatrice's place in their lives. She remained a part of Ethan's heart and Lucas's life. In one quiet corner of the living room, they kept a small shelf just for her, framed photos, a fresh white flower every week, and a sketchbook where Lucas occasionally drew pictures of his angel mom from the soft corners of his memory. Lena never touched that space, but every time she passed by, she smiled. Because real love doesn't compete. It makes room. Day by day, they didn't need to prove anything. They just lived within the little things, grocery shopping together, hanging laundry, arguing over spaghetti sauce, or walking Lucas to the park on Saturday afternoons. Nothing was grand. But maybe true love hides in the ordinary. That evening, after Lucas had fallen asleep, they sat quietly on the bench outside the balcony. The city glowed below them, lights flickering like stars on the ground. Above, there was only the wind and the steady rhythm of peace. Ethan placed his hand gently over hers. Lena leaned her head on his shoulder, closed her eyes, and whispered, soft enough that only he could hear, "I used to think love was for other people. Not anymore. It found me exactly when I stopped searching." Ethan didn't answer. He just held her hand tighter. And in that silence, free of pain, free of doubt, they both knew A new chapter had truly begun. Sometimes the best families are the ones we build, not the ones we're born into.